I really appreciated before I began my talk, and that was we breathe together. So I'm going to ask you again to breathe with me. Just take it in. And one more. And one final breath together, please. Thank you. So several weeks ago, I had already decided that I wanted to talk about immortality today in honor of Remembrance Day. I had it in my mind, you know, my process is I get this idea and I percolate on it, and I start looking for stuff, and I start adding stuff and everything. It's quite a process that I go through, and so this is where I was headed. And then the unexpected result of the U.S. presidential election happened, and I thought perhaps I needed to address that. We've been talking about it off and on for a couple of weeks, and so I asked someone, that light is just not going to work. I'm sorry. Whoever thinks that you are illuminating me, please unilluminate me, because I can't see a thing. So, seriously. That's not happening. Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, that's a little bit better. So here I'm thinking this, and so I asked some of my wise Canadian friends, so what should I do, you know? And almost to a person, they said, I am so over the election, it's time to move on. And frankly, I gotta tell you, I'm fine with that, but I'm fine with it for different reasons. Because one of the things that we're taught about in ministerial training is to never go through your process in front of your congregation. In other words, make sure you've come out on the other side before you talk about it, right? And the truth is, I'm still working my way through this. So I'm happy to let it go for now. So instead, we are going to stick with what I originally planned, the happy topic of death. And immortality and life ongoing, which, believe it or not, happens to be one of my favorite topics in the world to talk about. I love to teach it. I love to talk about it in class. I love to talk about it on Sundays. I love to do memorial services, honest to goodness. Because as metaphysicians, as religious scientists, as people of new thought, we have this incredibly healthy and positive and inspirational view of this process that we call death. We don't consider it an ending, but rather a transition of one aspect of life to another. I love this quote. I don't know who this David Searles is, but I just loved it. It said, seeing death as the end of life is like seeing the horizon as the end of the ocean. Yeah? I just love that. So I'm going to ask, particularly people who are new here or kind of new to me and my style, please don't run out of the room screaming and be afraid of this topic. I promise it is not going to be morbid or scary. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee that you are going to leave out of here feeling absolutely wonderful and in love with life. So are you with me? Are you with me? Okay, so I have a story to tell you. Let me see if I can remember it now. Really, whoever is doing the lights, I'm going to really ask to have that bright one taken off of me. Dwayne, if you can make that happen. It's just very unpleasant right now. Thank you. So, this minister, he's been a minister for 40 years of a very, very conservative and very, very straight-laced church, and he dies. And he goes to heaven, and he's in line waiting to get into the pearly gates. And the guy in front of him is this real rough around the edges looking guy in jeans and a leather jacket. And St. Peter says, okay, who are you? And the guy steps up and he goes, I'm Joe Smith. He says, I'm a cab driver from New York City. And St. Peter checks the list and he goes, oh yes, Mr. Smith, we've been expecting you. Here is your silken robe and here is your gold staff, and please come into heaven. So he goes on, and then the minister stands up and he goes, I'm Reverend Joseph Snow from St. Peter's Basilica, and he says, I've been a minister for 40 years doing the work of God. And St. Peter checks his list and he says, oh yes, Reverend, welcome. Here is your cotton robe and your wooden staff. And Reverend Snow says, wait a minute here, this guy is a cab driver in New York, and he gets a silk robe and a golden staff, and I've been devoting myself to God for 40 years, and all I get is a cotton robe and a wooden staff. And St. Peter says, hey, here in heaven, we judge by results. He said, when you preached, people slept. When he drove, people prayed. So in order to have a really meaningful discussion about the topic of death, we first have to cover one basic truth of life, and that is, it is eternal. It is ongoing. Now, obviously, not the life that we are living right now, here on earth with these bodies. These bodies are not designed to live forever. You know, your toaster has planned obsolescence so that it doesn't last forever. So do our bodies. These have planned obsolescence. They are not intended to live forever. So that means that the life that I'm talking about, the life that is ongoing, is life with a capital L. And life with a capital L is eternal. It is ongoing. In other words, that energy, that essence, that animating spirit that is within everything always has been and always will be. It's not going to go away. So how do we know this? Well, first of all, we have to understand that everything is part of the divine. Everything is part of the universe. Everything is part of God. And so life as we know it is one of the ways that the universe expresses itself. So if God is life, it cannot produce the opposite, which is death. Does that make sense? If God is life, it cannot produce the opposite. It cannot produce death. And if God is all there is, which is what we teach and what we believe, then life cannot be in opposition with itself. There is only one. So it can change, it can transform, it can transition, but it can't die. So to better understand this, we take our lead again, always, from watching nature. Because everything in nature is so orderly, it's so efficient, it's so intelligent, that absolutely nothing goes to waste. Everything is used, everything is utilized, everything is recycled, if you will. So in nature, you know this, when something dies, whether it's a tree or a plant or an animal, it transitions into something else, right? When a tree or a plant or an animal dies, it eventually decomposes and it becomes mulch that then provides nutrients to the soil. And then the soil gives birth to another tree or another plant, which in turn provides nutrients to another animal, and so on and so forth. Yes? Yes? Okay. Well, the same thing has to be true for us. So that when we die, when our bodies die, they are respectfully taken care of, and then they become part of the earth again, whether it's through a traditional burial or through a cremation or a burial at sea, however you do it. On a side note, I think I'm going to do this. You know, this new kind of green way of burying one's ashes? So it's in a biodegradable urn. that has your ashes and then it has the seed of a tree? How cool is that? Yes? Talk about from ash to ash and dust to dust. I think that's the coolest thing ever. So however you choose to have your physical form taken care of after you transition, the truth is your essence, your core, your consciousness continues on. Just as we have learned and evolved and grown in this lifetime, so will we continue to learn and evolve and grow in the next one, and the next one, and the next one. I love Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is considered a leading expert on death and dying, said this: death is simply a shedding of the physical body, like the butterfly shedding its cocoon. It is no different from taking off a suit of clothes one no longer needs. It is a transition to a higher state of consciousness where you continue to perceive, to understand, to laugh, and to be able to grow. Isn't that beautiful? And then Ernest Holmes says something similar in his inimitable way. Each one is on a pathway to an endless expression of life, truth, and beauty. Behind us is the all. Before us, within us, and expressing through us is the all. I believe in the immortality and the continuity of the individual stream of consciousness. Humanity is an ascending principle of life, individuality, and expression through experience and unfoldment. We're going to go on. We continue on. That spark of the divine within us cannot die. It must continue on, and it must continue on in awareness, in life. Everybody take a deep breath, because I have a story to tell you. It's one of my favorite stories to tell when I'm using this topic. It really illustrates the idea of what transition truly means. It's called the parable of the twins. Once upon a time, twin boys were conceived. Weeks passed and the twins developed. As their awareness grew, they laughed for joy. Together, the twins explored their world. When they found their mother's cord that gave them life, they sang for joy. How great our mother's love is that she shares her own life with us. Isn't it great that we were conceived? Isn't it great to be alive? As weeks stretched to months, the twins noticed how each was changing and growing. What does it mean, said one. It means our stay in this world is coming to an end, said the other. But I don't want to go, said one. I want to stay here always. We have no choice, said the other. But maybe there is life after birth. But how can there be, responded one. We will shed our life cord, and how can life possibly be without it? Besides, we've seen evidence that others were here before us, and none of them has returned to tell us there is life after birth. No, this is the end. Maybe there is no mother after all. But there has to be, protested the other. How else could we be here? How do we remain alive? Have you ever seen our mother? Said one. Maybe she only lives in our minds. Maybe we made her up because the idea made us feel good. So the last days in the womb were filled with deep questioning and fear. Finally, the moment of birth arrived. When the twins had passed from their world, they opened their eyes and cried for joy, for what they saw exceeded their fondest dreams. That is birth, and that is death. I've heard the theory that transition or death is actually like a graduation. Just like school, when we finish what we needed to learn here, we graduate to the next level of learning. I like that idea. That works for me. Because I believe that what we learn and what we experience in this lifetime goes with us to our next experience. I mean, think about this. Do you agree that we live in an intelligent universe? Yeah. Despite the election results? Okay, so we live in an intelligent universe. So does it make sense that we live here and we live the lives that we live and we have the experiences that we have and we gain the wisdom that we gain and then it just dies because our bodies, the vehicles, these temporary vehicles cease to exist? That isn't intelligent, nor is it efficient. And we live in an intelligent and efficient universe. So it makes much more sense to me that we move on with our life school education intact. And when we see life and death from that viewpoint, it takes some of the sting out of it, doesn't it? When we know and we believe that who we are continues after our bodies wear out, it gives us a whole new understanding and way of looking at death and of life. So the question becomes, how are we living our lives here and now? How are we doing the things that we want to do, or the goals that we're setting, something that's going to support us when we graduate? Better still, are the things that we are doing right now having a positive impact on the lives that we are touching, the people in our lives? Michael Josephson, who has an organization in the States called Character Counts, wrote this. He said, "Ready or not, someday it will all come to an end. There will be no more sunrises, no minutes, hours, or days. All the things you collected, whether treasured or forgotten, will pass to someone else. Your wealth, fame, and temporal power will shrivel to irrelevance. It will not matter what you owned or what you were owed. Your grudges, resentments, frustrations, and jealousies will finally disappear. So too, your hopes, ambitions, plans, and to-do lists will expire. The wins and losses that once seemed so important will fade away. It won't matter where you came from or what side of the tracks you lived on at the end. It won't matter whether you were beautiful or brilliant. Even your gender and skin color will not matter. So what will matter? How will the value of your days be measured? What will matter is not what you bought, but what you built. Not what you got, but what you gave. What will matter is not your success, but your significance. What will matter is not what you learned, but what you taught. What will matter is every act of integrity, compassion, courage, or sacrifice that enriched, empowered, or encouraged others to emulate your example. What will matter is not your competence, but your character. What will matter is not how many people you knew, but how many will feel a lasting loss when you're gone. What will matter is not your memories, but the memories that lived on in those who loved you. What will matter is how long you will be remembered, by whom, and for what. He goes on to say, living a life that matters doesn't happen by accident. It's not a matter of circumstance, but of choice. Choose to live a life that matters. So I invite all of us to think about that. How are we living our lives now? How are we showing up now? How are we honoring this life that we have been given? What legacy are we leaving? And what legacy are we taking with us when we transition to our next life? Because take it, we will. Simply because we're part of this great ongoing spiral called life. So on this Remembrance Day weekend, and I have got to say, I love how Canada observes Remembrance Day. It's very moving. As we honor those who lived and died for our freedoms, let us commit to living the very best life that we can on this plane, and the next, and the next, and the next. So thank you for being in this life school with me at this time. I love you, and so please.